there. Welcome. Welcome to Story Time. It's a new month, and so I'm working with a new, let's call it a new mantra, a new intention, or a new focus for Story Time. And I'm going to see if we can weave in a little bit of a story in the sense that you've already heard me say this a million, thousand, hundred million, whatever, trillion times, is that beginning again. And that is not so hard to convince folks about the new year, or even the return to fall schedule and the return of school for many of us who are in the academic schedule, whether it's for our children, for ourselves, or just kind of the energy of our community. But to begin again actually does benefit from a little bit of pre-work. And that's really what I want to talk about this month, the practices that help us to cultivate the courage to begin again. Now, our month is a little shorter in terms of live broadcasts. And so for the next 3 weeks, today and then 2 more following Tuesdays, I want to kind of weave in some of the stories of my life's learning to help you understand not only where Begin Again came from, but more importantly, how it is that you can relate this, whether or not you embrace the mantra begin again or your own adaptation. It really is a cultivation of courage to do what needs to be done, to do hard things, to do perhaps something that we've never done before. And it's in this courage, this cultivation of courage, the planting of the seeds. I want to be brave. I want to act in courage, that we really begin this process of beginning again. So it immediately, when I think of begin again, it takes me back to how many times I had to start over. And in a very tangible way, that was related to every time that my family would move. Now there's an adventure in that move, in finding a new home, and starting a new school, and making new friends. But as a child, it felt like I was starting over. I like to play Legos. And it's a controlled play that has a guide, has an instruction manual. But I also enjoy playing with Legos freestyle. I'm not super good at it, right? I'm not super inventive, but my call to fame, if there is one, is building a yoga studio in Legos. And this was even before I built a tangible yoga studio. But finding the right brick and laying down the foundation, you really have to begin and build up. Now, when I built this yoga studio, I had fully come to embrace begin again as my mantra, as my practice. And so as I got up 3 or 4 bricks and realized that I needed a different foundation in order to support a door or a window or a fan. Yeah, I built fans into my Lego yoga world. So in that space, it was a clear destination, a shift in my plan, my vision, my intention that required me to undo what I had built in order to rebuild, to begin again the building of the walls, the building of the foundation for the yoga studio. But I can honestly tell you that it took me a long time to get to that point, in the sense that when I had to start over, whether it was my career, whether it was my education, whether it was a new home as a child and we would relocate for my dad's work, whether it was the scrapping of my first draft for an essay, whether it was in grad school or whether it was in 2nd grade when I was first learning to write paragraphs, it felt like a failure. To me, starting over, to redo something, had to be my fault. It had to be my failure. It had to be my shortcoming if I had to start over. And I couldn't see it as any other way. And in fact, in some ways, that was affirmed and validated by the teachers and those around me. My brothers were particularly not kind when it came to having to do it again, to redo, to do over. They would point out my failings to no end. But in the sense that, where is it that we learn this idea that taking a step back, that turning around, maybe even asking for directions, asking for help, when did that get correlated with some form of weakness or understanding of failure? I don't know. But for me, it feels almost as old as I am, almost as old as my bones themselves. And yet, every time we take a breath, I don't feel like I have to redo the last one. Every time I come to my mat, now as a yogi, let me back up because this is just occurring to me. When I do come to my mat and I try to replicate an earlier experience, meaning a sequence, or even a sensation or an epiphany that I maybe haven't quite fully grasped or integrated, 9 times out of 10, maybe even 9.9 times out of 10 that I do that, I fail miserably. And by that failure, what I mean is that not only am I unable to recapture what I experienced the last time, but I'm also unavailable for what is ready to meet me at that moment. In other words, my attempt to redo prohibits me from truly having a unique beginning again, to take me to a newer, deeper depth. And so when I left my self-proclaimed career path, this is taking me way back, when I turned in my academic higher education professional card, and literally that meant that I didn't re-up my annual dues for the Association of Professionals in the Field of Higher Education. I gave myself full-on permission to begin again. I didn't have to redo my education because I had what I felt I needed to transfer over to the private sector. Now, in my naivete, I thought that transitioning from academia to the private sector was going to give me that fresh breath, that fresh start to begin again in a way that was in greater alignment. And maybe it was. But more importantly, what I learned in that transition, in embracing the opportunity to begin again, I got rid of things, both tangible and psychological, that were no longer serving me. The first of which was this burden that I laid on myself about, I've been talking about being a university professor for 10 years, that was my career ambition. Well, ironically enough, fast forward 10 years, and I go through a similar letting go process when I leave what is essentially my second full-time, it's actually probably my third, because I went from academia to private sector, both in education and training. Then I went into independent work and owning my own business, which then laid the foundation, the opportunity for building confidence and competence, so that when I came to open a yoga studio, to embrace yoga, not just as my personal practice, but as my dharma, my life's work, it was built on a foundation of clear confidence and competence. The missing ingredient at this point in my life was the courage. And initially that courage wasn't there. In fact, that was why I partnered with another professional in a complementary modality. And in that partnership, it gave me a greater sense of safety, of hopefully, my hope was of collaboration. Now, that partnership did not last past a year. It really failed from the beginning because we were so misaligned in our style of service as well as our idea of collaboration. That aside, it did, by nature of the failing of our cooperation, the failing of our joined effort, helped me to find the courage to launch off and out on my own. So what do I mean by that? Well, embracing what's next is about also admitting where we are, where we've come from. And it's through that practice of getting clear. This is why I use the Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept. Ikigai is the translation, the transliteration for English spelling. And in the Ikigai, it guides us through this kind of overlapping, or the Venn diagram of circles, in the sense that the center of that 4-circle overlap, that Venn diagram, is the Ikigai. That's a Japanese term, which is life's work, or from the Sanskrit, our Dharma. But the center, those overlapping circles, are 4 things: what we love, what we're good at, what the world needs, and what can the world afford to pay us for. Now, we'll talk about the Ikigai in other areas, but I'll make this come back full circle in the sense that by the time I was ready to step out on my own, I had spent time cultivating clarity in terms of what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were. In other words, I wasn't weak on business strategy. I went to school for that. I wasn't weak on being an educator. I went to school for that too. I did a lot of schooling for how to be a trainer. But the courage to step out as the owner was something that was still unfamiliar to me, even though I'd been running my own business under the umbrella of a parent organization for over 10 years. Stepping out here was the beginning again here at Life's Work Yoga, embodying my Dharma in the work of yoga as a way of inspired living was completely me revealing myself. And that took the act of courage. And that's the whole point, right? The Ikigai gives us the clarity, the understanding, as Stephen Cope says, peeling back the layers to see truth. But it's the history, it's the community, it's the competence that I've culled over my years of study and paying attention that gave me the confidence to peel back those layers. And when peeling back those layers, I gained competence, not only in seeing what was there, but also digesting it and processing it so that I could choose how to move forward. And this is where courage was absolutely necessary. Absolutely, without a doubt, to move into your best life is going to require courage. And for me, I found that courage in the breath practice, specifically in cultivating the beginning again permission with every single breath, the paying attention to notice the breath, to notice how the body responded to the breath. And I didn't come to this depth of breath practice until life incapacitated me physically and actually mentally, both in terms of my bicycle accident and then later in terms of abdominal surgery. I couldn't do asana. And because of some of the drugs and the way that my body responds to drugs, I really didn't have a safe space in my headspace in recovery from surgeries as well. Now, I had the history and the capacity for meditation and that compassion practice that comes with meditation. But it was the breath that reminded me that no matter what my body could or couldn't do, no matter what my mind could or couldn't manage, couldn't handle, couldn't hold on to, I had access and control of my breath. And think about that in terms of when life would get hard. It was my breath, in hindsight, that I could see that would change. Whether it was because I was sucker punched metaphorically or physically. I do have 5 brothers, mind you, so a lot of sucker punching happening in my childhood. But that breath leaving me by force, right? Or maybe it was unable to get breath. I suffered from anxiety quite a bit as a child. Fear and this sense of failure really stifled my breath to the point where I couldn't get a breath and was treated for a number of breath ailments. That said, I don't have any of those difficulties today. And I believe it's because, not that I'm super, super brave. I am quite brave. I am quite willing to take risks, calculated and wise risks now. But that's because I am intimate, I believe, with breath, with prana herself. So notice your breath. What is your breath building on? What is the foundation? Where is your calm, abiding, safe space? What are you confident in your competence? Maybe you need to spend some time with the Ikigai, and if so, reach out, because I love to help you peel back those layers to clearer seeing. If you don't know your next step, stay in the breath. This is the principle of the breathe, move, rest practice. Stay in the breath until you know how to move wisely. the action, the doing, the non-doing, the undoing, and the redoing that would be appropriate. And then after the work, after we've engaged, whether we were successful or not, we come back to rest. And in that, we recuperate. In that, we reflect, we integrate, we digest, we ask for feedback, because part of that rest is also coming back into alignment. And then we breathe again. And in the breath, we call up courage. We learn to be in that pregnant pause just before the breath enters and just before the breath evacuates. Rolf Gates says that our inhalation is the practice. In other words, that's the work of our life. The exhalation is our dharma. The exhalation is the gift that we can give one another. We can give ourselves. Not only because it makes room for the next inhalation, but it makes room for the shift, the change. It literally ignites the parasympathetic nervous system to help us ebb and flow. It makes room for the inhalation. It makes room for the work. Yeah, courage is the impetus to doing the work of change. So perhaps there's something that you're in the midst of shifting and changing. Maybe it's even correlated to just the idea that we're going to have a fresh start with January 1st. Maybe it's that you want to do the holidays a little differently. You want to do lunchtime today a little differently. Let me tell you, I just got back from a 5-day travel trip, and I ate crazy schedule, crazy food, things that I don't eat all the time, and I'm still suffering from it. Now, I get to begin again today because I've been here before, right? The consequences of poor decisions. But with more compassion, I can see that the consequences of those decisions were still the best that I had available, giving the control I had over my schedule and the location of me on plane, off plane, traveling to round into new areas, dark at 3:45 in the afternoon. What the is that all about? How do you eat dinner when it's already flum dark? How do you eat breakfast when it's not even yet light yet, right? All of these scenarios helped me to witness with more truth and call upon more compassion, so that despite the fact that when I stepped onto the scale today, all my hard-earned weight loss, and I'm on a small weight loss journey at the moment from post-COVID, is all gone. The scale is back where it was when I hit that point of like, you got to do something different. Okay. But I lost it before. I lost that weight. I was able to shift things around. I can do that again. And that is where courage meets compassion. And we begin again in wisdom to do the practice of living well, of living better, of living in alignment. I know you have stories of beginning again, of starting over, of having to crumple up and rip up, shred up your plan, your strategy, your essay, your whatever. But isn't there beauty in that choice as well? How different it is when someone else rips up our plan than it is when we get to choose. That plan is done and we move on with the next. That's courage. Now, that doesn't mean that courage isn't a part of when someone else rips up our plan, someone else being circumstances or a tangible person, that they choose something that negates our plan. Our choice, our courage is about how we respond to the circumstances as they are. And our breath will give us a clue into how we're responding, how our body is receiving this new information. Has our breath hesitated? Has it increased? Has it come more shallow or more depth? Maybe it's more vocal. And to be completely honest, 10 breaths, one breath is often not enough for me. I need to take as many breaths as needed so that when I'm ready, I show up mind, body, and spirit as much as my capacity will allow in the given moment. And that too is where compassion has grown by way of this practice of the breath, and of course, asana and meditation as well. Thanks for letting me share this story. I got lots more trauma stories about starting over and feeling that failure, but I really want to help you to shift and to reframe that from a place of compassion and love, to see how those opportunities themselves just might be the universe inviting us into more intimacy and back to the path of our own alignment, our own dharma. Are you ready? You're ready to dive into breath, to let it be the impetus to find your source of courage. There's no question, right? Our Manipura chakra here at our diaphragm correlates to our breath, correlates to our parasympathetic nervous system, and correlates to the fire of getting shit done. So let's get some shit done in the terms of becoming our best selves and living from that confidence and competence and embracing the opportunity for courage to do hard things. Take care of you. Take care of those around you. That's what this is all about. May you be well. May you breathe deeply and move freely. Labor lovingly. And live vibrantly and intimately with prana. Be well. Namaste.